Hello again, and welcome back to our continuing series on tips, tricks, and repair ideas for American Flyer steam engines. And today we're going to be focusing on the commutator and some of the issues that can crop up with that and some ways to take care of that. Today on Austin's American Flyer.
The other thing I thought I'd do is just mention this, and it's been a while since I talked about this, so that's the reason I'm doing it. When you pull an old engine like this apart, you want to inspect the commutator and see, is it got cupping? So if we spin this, does it wobble? Maybe not as easy to see as I'd like to just doing it by hand, but the answer is no, it doesn't wobble. However, what may not be easy for you to see is there are some definite grooves worn in the plate, in the copper here, where the brushes have spent many years going around. And it's interesting because I noticed on the shell here, and again, I don't know how easy it's to see, but look at that coloring. That's all that's all from the brushes disintegrating. Which, speaking of brushes, here they are, and this is the length they should be. So they're half to less than half of the original length. So it's really amazing the motor worked at all, because there would have been so little material for the springs to push on by this point. But back to the commutator. So you can leave it this way. But look how thick the copper is. There's a lot of material there. So what I'm going to do is actually turn this down. Now, I wish I had a metal lathe. Oh, I wish I had a metal lathe because it would make it so nice to do this. But I'm going to instead use sandpaper and a block, put this in my Dremel or in my drill to spin it. And I'll start with, like a 600 grit and work my way down to like a 2000 grit. And when you're doing that, it's a good idea to use wet dry sandpaper, use some lubricant on the sandpaper as you're running the copper across it. And, you may not be able to get it perfect. I'm not worried about it being super perfect, but I know I can get it better than this. And that'll just mean a lot more years of good run time. So a couple things I thought I'd mention on our journey to getting this thing back up and running. Well, I ended up using a much more aggressive sandpaper on this commutator because it was so deeply grooved. And I've taken off a lot of material. But you can see here between the plates, there's still a groove there, and there's a lesser amount in the middle of the plates. But I've removed as much material as I'm comfortable with. You can see there's still a fair amount left, but at this point, it's time to go to the less aggressive sandpapers and begin to remove the ridges I've created and get a nice finish on the front, and I will show you that when I get there. All right, there we go. I finish this off with 2500 grit, and again, you can see it's not perfect. There's still a little bit of an indentation, but my thinking at this point is that indentation is small enough that the end of the brush will, go beyond that. And again, if I had a metal lathe, I would be more intentional about how far down I take this, but I want to be careful. So I think this is where I'm going to stop, and I know it's not perfect, but it's certainly an improvement and should make this engine serviceable for another 60, 70 years. So this is kind of a poor man's method for resurfacing commutators. You want to start with something that's got a little more abrasive surface to it in terms of wet dry sandpaper. I have three variations here that you can see are pretty well used and just about ready to throw out, but I've got a 280 that I start with typically. Again, it's not super aggressive, but it's a little bit. And then after I've done that step, I go to an 800. And again, it's pretty well used. And then I jump all the way up to a 2500 for kind of the final finishing pass. So basically what I do is I wrap the sandpaper around the wood so that it's nice and flat. And you can kind of see here how that's got rounded surface. So this is an edge that I used to that commutator. And then I take some 3-in-1 oil and I just put a drop or two on here because you're using a finer grit paper, it's going to clog it up really quick, almost right away. So you need to use the oil, and that helps to give you some better cutting and kind of moves the debris that you're trimming off of the face out of the way, so you get a little bit longer cuts from each piece of sandpaper. But even so, this particular piece, I had to, I went all the way along here, and that was, speeding up the Dremel or the drill and getting RPMs up pretty good. Although I think I did it in low RPMs. But once I was pretty satisfied with the surface, I took a rag and wiped the oil off again because I, as you can see, really reuse my sandpaper. It's like, that stuff is like gold. It's so rare. Or because I just try to make stuff last. And here you can see this was an area where I did the next pass. And the nice thing is, as you get further and further along, in theory, there should be less material you're removing because the remaining grooves on the surface of the commutator are getting smaller and smaller. So again, you still want to use your oil, you still want to have a flat surface, and you want to make sure that you're not at an angle, pressing down perpendicular. Easier said than done with one hand, but that's the process. And if you can do that, then you're going to end up with a resurfaced flat area. And again, take a look at the side here. How much material do you have left? And is it worth resurfacing? Is it not? That's a call each of us have to make with this old stuff. So there you have it. That's what I did on cleaning up the surface of my commutator on this Atlantic.